Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Planning Advisory Committee meeting for the town of Quispamsis for Tuesday, August 9th. On item 2, approval agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda, please? Oh, hang on, Brent. Go ahead, Brent. Can I have a seconder on that? Mark? Thank you. Can we vote on that, please? Motion carried. On item 3, disclosures of interest. Mark?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, on item 7E.
Okay, thank you, Mark. We'll remind you at that time when we get up to that item. Thank you. Item 4, approval of previous minutes. Can I have a motion to approve previous minutes, please? Brenda?
So moved.
Can I have a seconder on that? Mark?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Can we vote on that, please? Motion carried unanimously. We'll move on to item 5, business arising from previous minutes. Can I have a motion to receive and file, please? Mr. Bishop?
So moved.
Can I have a seconder on that? Kendall?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Can we vote on that, please? Motion carried by a vote of 6-0 unanimously. We'll move on to item 6, unfinished business. None being. That'll take us to new business. Item 7A is 184 approval to place signage on the building at 184 Hampton Road, PID 249797. Could the applicant please come up to the podium and state their name? And after you state your name, we'll get Jennifer to introduce the item for us, please.
My name's Anthony Milton.
Okay, Anthony, I'm going to get Jennifer to introduce the item for everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are looking for a variance of 7.55 square meter variance to Section 13A1 of the sign bylaw 36 to allow and to permit a second fascia sign on a building. The property is located in Central Commercial Zone. It has a lot size of 6,497 square meters. The proposal is to keep the fascia signage that is currently there from the previous owner and to also provide additional signage in that triangle portion above that signage. The bylaw allows for 4 square meters if the sign is illuminated. This sign is going to be illuminated and has a total sign area of 10.29 square meters, so the variance required is 7.55 meters. Notice was sent to neighboring properties in 100 meters. No concerns were received at the time of the writing of this report. The concerns from staff is the continued increase to allow a maximum allowable sign areas to increase over time and may result in larger signs showing up in our town. So we must be diligent in making sure that this doesn't set a precedence, but the design of the building, it does have that area, and we can see why it would be of interest for the owners to wish to have the signage there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jennifer. Mr. Walton, you would have received the same package we did in the mail. Is there anything you'd like to add or discuss prior to members of PAC or members of the public asking you questions? You're okay?
Yep.
Any members of PAC have any questions for the applicant? Brenda?
Just a quick one. We see the wordings on the sign that's going this way. Is that carved in stone? Because it's quite wordy.
Actually, I think what you're seeing is, I don't think it's carved in stone, no. We're still kind of working on the layout for that.
Oh, okay, it's not, it's distracting, I think, is what, from your big sign that you want up front.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, I haven't really had anything to do with that design yet, so I think that's
maybe-
still, I think that's still
Yeah.
in the works, the actual
And
final copy.
That's just my opinion, so it's whatever you think.
The
should be
the
in there.
last one was a little busy too, the one before that, but,
I mean, I don't want all you're trying to say, but you know, you want guests and music and
yeah.
this and that and the other thing. Anyway,
Well, we'll work with the client and see if we can eliminate some of that and make it as unbusy as possible, I guess.
that was my opinion.
Thanks, Brenda. Any other members of PAC have any questions for the applicant? None being, is there anyone online or in the audience willing to speak for or against this item? Is there anyone in the audience or online willing to speak for or against this item? Third and final time, is there anyone in the audience or online willing to speak for or against this item? None being, would a member of PAC like to put a motion for or against with terms and conditions, please? Brent?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the following motion. Recommendation, the Planning Advisory Committee proceed with approving the variance of one additional fascia sign and the variance of 7.55 square meters for the total area of the fascia signs at 184 Hampton Road, PID 249797, subject to the following terms and conditions. 1, a permit is obtained prior to erecting any signage, and 2, no further permanent signage is permitted without the approval of the Planning Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Brent. Can I have a seconder on that, please? Kendall?
I'll second it, thanks.
Any debate on that motion? None being, could you put a vote forward, please? That motion's been carried unanimously. In 5 to 7 business days, you have a letter in the mail with your approval. Please work with the town to have them all necessary paperwork and documentation in place, and best of luck. Thank you. You're welcome. Going to go on to item 7B, approval to rezone 318 Hampton Road, PID 0045185 from residential R1 to neighborhood commercial, NC. Could the applicant please come up, state your name for the record, please?
Mallory Wright, representing Madison Wright, the owner.
Okay, thank you. Jennifer, you want to introduce the topic?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is actually a request from council to the advisory committee for their written comments regarding this rezoning application. The rezoning application is at 318 Hampton Road. It is in a residential neighborhood and is zoned residential. The applicant is proposing to develop 318 Hampton Road with a residential commercial use, with a dwelling unit on the top floor of the building and an 8-chair hairdressing salon occupying 100% of the lower level of the same building. The applicant is proposing to reside in the upper level of the building and be remodeling the lower level to accommodate 8 salon chairs, 3 shampoo sinks, and 2 hair drying stations. The applicant herself will occupy 1 of the salon chairs, and the other 7 will be available for rent. The municipal plan, bylaw number 54, speaks to this type of process, the neighborhood commercial rezoning and considerations and the method of the rezoning. Section 413.1 states that it is a proposal of council to permit neighborhood commercial uses which serve local neighborhood needs within residential areas only as an amendment to a zoning bylaw, and provide that the commercial use are clearly subsidiary to the residential use. Such uses shall be subject to provisions of adequate parking, demonstrating that traffic patterns will not be significantly impacted, and adequate buffering from adjacent properties. Staff have looked at parking for the proposed use and have found that a reasonable amount of parking to support the business would be 15 parking stalls. And this would be in addition to the requirements of a 1.5 parking stalls for the residents. In conversation with the applicant regarding parking requirements, there has been an area identified on the site that could be used for staff parking, and that is shown in your package in Figure 1. Other major considerations of council and PAC by default include municipal services that are provided to the lot. This lot does have both water and sewer provided. However, the main building has not yet been hooked up to the water supply as it still is operating off of a well. So that it would be recommended that that would be a condition of approval, that the building be hooked into our water system. The proposed use is also subject to the Planning Committee, Advisory Committee approval as a combined residential commercial use. So part of this is asking for your approval for this use in a neighborhood commercial zone. And the general consideration for this is that 100% of the top floor is residential and 100% of the bottom floor would be dedicated to commercial use. As required by the Community Planning Act, the council must seek written views of the PAC, and that's what brings us here tonight, as well as requesting the approval of the use. At this time, no concerns have been received. Notification was sent out by the clerk's office, and we have not received any concerns from the public. With regard to the approval of the discretionary use, staff have not yet received interior building plans, and therefore it is not possible to confirm if there is an entrance to the residence component and the business component, which they are required to be separate. And PAC may wish to clarify this with the applicant. And one other thing is that we're also seeking approval to Section 6P3B of the zoning bylaw to permit parking within a front yard setback. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome, Jennifer. Mr. Wright, you would have received the same package we did in the mail. Is there anything you'd like to add or discuss prior to members of PAC or the public asking you some questions?
Yes. I just wanted to speak to the parking requirement and ask for consideration. We've got a new proposal for parking to continue with 10 spots across the front, running parallel with Hampton Road. A spot at the very front door for space and a half for accessibility spot. So that's 11 spots on the lower level. And then for the staff parking on the upper level, the existing layout is already a parking lot, and we wanted to possibly ask for that not to be paved to reduce cost for the project. So paving across the front for the 10 spaces and the 4 spots up on the Autumn Avenue side for staff to be gravel. That gives us a total of 16 and a half spaces total.
Yes, that would be when you go in the residential driveway on the right-hand side. That's
Yeah, I have
according
3
to
of
the
these.
drawing.
Can I pass that?
Yeah, sure, pass that. Let's see. Just give one to those right there. They're here, no, they'll see them right here. If you want to let them see it. Any other concerns you, okay? They the same plan? Yeah. Yeah, okay. That's what I thought. I think it shows it on our plan here. It says, proposed staff parking, so it's in that same section.
Exactly. I guess we're just looking for the gravel versus
Yeah.
paving in that
Yep,
section.
okay. Any members of PAC have any questions for the applicant?
Between the upper and the lower level. That's one of your questions.
Mark?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for my own clarification here, where's the entrance to the business and the entrance to the house can be located?
The entrance to the business is on the Autumn Avenue side from the it's a walkout basement.
Right, where the arrow is there now?
Correct.
Okay.
And then the residence is around, exactly.
At the back.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a
Thank-
deck on there. So there's
thank
an
you.
existing driveway. The staff parking would be to the right of that. And paved parking across the front of Hampton Road for 10 spots
Thank you.
Thank you.
with an Autumn Avenue access.
Jennifer?
My only concern is there aren't any measurements on the site plan that's been submitted.
The contractor threw that at me this afternoon. It's 100 feet across Hampton Road with allowing for all the easements. And there's room for 10 spots there at, is it 10 feet, 10 feet a spot, roughly? And enough room for turning. I mean, I can get you a proper diagram with measurements, but.
Pardon me. The reason I brought that up is because the parking lot that you're proposing for the staff, there's actually a requirement in the bylaw for a 3-meter buffer between that and the adjacent property, the
Right.
abutting property. So I don't know if it's,
Lots of room for that.
there is,
Lots
okay.
of room for that.
As
yeah.
long as that can show up on a site plan and be accurate, that would be wonderful.
Enough room.
Thank you, Jennifer, for bringing up those concerns. Any other questions from members of the PAC? Brent?
Mr. Chairman, for the staff, with regards to the residential part of the application, does the applicant require 2 entrances into that building for safety? She has 1 entrance, there's gonna be 1 entrance off the bottom. My question is, for a safety point of view, does the building code mandate 2 points of exit?
There is a second entrance. There's a second door that faces onto Hampton Road.
I was just going to add that those details would be worked out at the point of the building permit application. So that would be something that building inspection would make sure was there. Thank you.
Matt, okay. Brenda?
Just a quick one. I'm assuming that that's going to have the access only from Autumn Avenue, not the Hampton Road?
Correct.
That's what you're planning. I don't have a problem with that. I drove down there today and said, would I want to see all those cars right there turned out and just getting up the Hampton Road ahead of me? But my other thing, when saw the details of their floor plan, I didn't see washer and dryer.
There is a washer and dryer,
Okay.
up and
because-
down.
Sorry?
Yes, on both units.
Okay, right down on the bottom, so for, yeah, okay. But other than that, yeah, probably could work.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. Any other questions from PAC members? None being, is there anyone in the audience or online willing to speak for or against this item? Is there anyone in the audience or online willing to speak for or against this item? Third and final time, is there anyone in the audience or online willing to speak for or against this item? None being, would a member of PAC like to put a motion for or against with terms and conditions for comments for council for the rezoning? Member of PAC like to put a motion for or against with the comments for the rezoning? If there's any other variants, okay, Mark, go ahead, Mark.
Mr. Chairman, I'll put a motion forward to support council with the rezoning of 318 Hampton Road, PID number 00451815, from residential R1 to neighborhood commercial NC The following reasonable terms and conditions should be considered. 1. Approve the discretionary use as found in section 15B1A of zoning bylaw number 038 to allow the residential commercial use at 318 Hampton Road. Number 2, approve a variance to section 6B3B to permit parking within the front yard setback. Number 3, the main building to be connected to municipal water service for both the proposed business and residential component. Number 4, a parking plan identifying 15 parking stalls for the commercial venture, including 1 barrier-free parking stall and 1.5 parking stall for the dwelling unit, is to be submitted and approved by the planning department prior to issuance of a building permit. Number 5, as per section 6P5C, the parking area will be surfaced with hot mix asphalt, Portland cement, concrete, and asphalt stone chip seal coat. A site drainage plan must be submitted to and approved by the town, identifying how drainage will be managed on the lot in response to the introduction of parking surface in the front yard. Number 7, a site plan be submitted identifying 3-meter buffering zone as it relates to any neighboring residential R1 zone. The site plan is to be approved by the town prior to building permit issuance. Number 8, all signage is to be approved by the town and to be located so as not to create a site distance problem with Hampton Road and Autumn Avenue. Number 9, all building lights to be downward directed. Number 10, the owner is to enter into a development agreement with the town of Quispamsis. And number 11, a building permit is issued prior to construction.
Violet?
Just about the paving on the residential portion of the
Yeah,
site plan that was mentioned earlier.
she had asked for the paving, not to be on the parking for the. Okay, Violet, you got that? Can I have a seconder on that, please? Mark?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mark. Is there any debate on that motion? Mr. Bishop?
It's the only comment I have, and I guess Jennifer addressed that, is the developer's agreement, I guess, or when the building permit is issued for that. Just in that drawing that's there is only one entrance in and out on that drawing, but you say that will be addressed, whether there is a second entrance needed or fire escape needed at that time. That's it.
Okay. Jennifer?
That is absolutely correct. At the
Okay.
time of the building permit application,
Has to
building
meet all the-
inspection
all the
will,
codes and
exactly, will
guidelines.
have to meet code. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. No further debate? Can we have a vote on that motion, please? Motion's carried. So the recommendations that you heard tonight from PAC will be forwarded on to council, and I'm assuming they'll be in touch with you for a meeting for council to, I believe there's an open forum for that, public forum for that discussion that'll happen in the near future. So best of luck. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to item 7C. An application requesting approval to erect a carport such that it requires a 3 meters side yard setback variance at 16 Braun Crescent, PID 303-49542. The applicants, come up and please state your name for the record, please.
Paula Brown.
Dr. Arnold Brown.
Okay. Dr. Brown, we're going to have Jennifer introduce that item first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The lot is located in a residential area with 1,730 square meters. The proposal is to construct a 25.6 square meter carport on the side yard that abuts Pleasant Avenue. Therefore, it does require a 7.5 meter setback. The street right-of-way for Pleasant Avenue is approximately 7 meters wide. The carport will be approximately 15 meters from the edge of the pavement on Pleasant Avenue. Notices were sent to neighboring properties within 50-meter radius. At the time of this report, no concerns have been received, and staff have no concerns with this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Dr. Brown, you would have received the same package we did in the mail. Is there anything you'd like to add or discuss prior to any questions from PAC or members of the public?
I don't think so.
Okay. Any members of PAC have any questions for the applicant? None being, is there anyone in the audience willing to speak for or against this item? Is there anyone in the audience or online willing to speak for or against this item? Third and final time, is there anyone online or in the audience willing to speak for or against this item? None being, would a member of PAC like to put a motion for or against with terms and conditions? Mr. Bishop.
I'll put a motion forward that the Planning Advisory Committee approve the 3-meter setback from the town's zoning bylaw 038, section 831A, to allow for the construction of a carport at 16 Braun Crescent, PID 303-49542, should be subject to the following terms and conditions. One, side lot is clearly defined prior to construction. If the property pins are not identifiable, a professional surveyor licensed by the province of New Brunswick must be hired to locate and mark the property lines. And 2, a building permit is obtained prior to any construction.
Second or not, Brent?
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any debate on that motion? None being, can we have a vote, please? Motion carried unanimously. In 5 to 7 business days, you have our letter in the mail with your approval. Please work with the town to have all necessary paperwork and documentation in place.
Thank
Best
you,
of luck.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 7E. An application requesting direct a fence such that it is 180 centimeters in height in the front yard at 2 Edwards Drive, PID 300-71641. Would you please state your name for the record, please? Mr. Power, we're going to have Jennifer introduce the item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is very similar to the last, where the property is a corner lot. So there are 2 front yards from a planning perspective, requiring a 7.5 meter. Sorry, not requiring a 7.5 meter. This one is for a fence. So a fence in a front yard can only be 75 centimeters tall. So because it's a corner lot, you would consider it your side yard, I'm sure. That's why we're here. The lot is found in R1 zone. It has 1,568 square meters, and it is found at the corner of Melanie and Edwards. They're requesting a variance of 105 centimeters to allow the fence along the Melanie Drive yard to be 180 centimeters high. They have received a variance in August 2019 for a fence, which allowed them to tie into a neighboring fence. The applicants are now wishing to increase the enclosed area so that they and their pets can enjoy the remainder of the lot. We sent notification to property owners within 50 meters of the subject lot, and no concerns have been received, and staff have no concerns at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Mr. Power, you would receive the same application we did. Anything you'd like to add or discuss prior to some questions from PAC or the members of the public? Okay, thank you. Any members of PAC have any questions for the applicant? Brenda?
Not a question, just more of a comment. The other portion of the fence looks lovely. I'm sure that will also.
Thank you, Brenda. No further questions. Anyone in the audience or online willing to speak for or against this item? Is there anyone in the audience or online willing to speak for or against this item? Third and final time, is there anyone in the audience or online willing to speak for or against this item? None being, would a member of PAC like to put a motion for or against with terms and conditions? Kendall?
I recommend the Planning Advisory Committee approve the 105 centimeter variance to section 6S2 of the town's zoning bylaw number 038 to allow a fence height in the front yard of 180 centimeters in height at 2 Edwards Drive, PID 3007161. It should be subject to the following terms and conditions. Number one, lot lines are clearly delineated prior to construction. If the property pins are not identifiable, a professional surveyor licensed by the province of New Brunswick should be hired to locate and mark the property line. And number two, building permit is obtained prior to any construction.
Thank you, Kendall. Mr. Guest, have a seconder on that?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Thank you. Any debate on that motion? None being, can we all have a vote on that, please? Motion carried unanimously. Next 5 to 7 business days, you have a letter in the mail, so please work with the town to have all necessary paperwork, documentation, and your permits in place. Best of luck. You're welcome. I'm going to go on to item 7E. Right order, aren't we? Yeah. Okay. 157, well, we have Mr. Guest is absent, disclosure of interest on that item, so he stepped out. With that being, we'll move on to item 7E, 157 Quispamsis Road, PID 302-15461. A 3-bay paramedic base for Medivie Health Services. Request to give consideration as similar to or compatible use with public utility facility. Is there a member of the applicant? State your name for the record, please.
Hi, Trevor Pierce.
Trevor, Mr. Pierce, we're going to have Dwight's going to introduce that item for us and we'll talk about it. Go ahead, Dwight.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the application that's before the Planning Advisory Committee has been indicated is to give consideration to the development or construction of a 3-bay paramedic base at the property currently located at 157 Quispamsis Road, corner of Quispamsis Road, Alma, and the Route 119. The application is being brought forward to the Planning Advisory Committee as is similar to or compatible with under the provision within the current zoning bylaw regarding residential zoning, an R1 zone, whereby public utility facilities are permitted. This is being brought forward for the Planning Advisory Committee to consider the proposed development to be similar to a public utility facility, as also looking at its compatibility with the particular area. So as stated, the current zoning is R1, single-family residential, so anything outside of that in terms of permitted or discretionary uses, in this case, particular case, we're using the provision of similar to for as a tool to provide PAC with an opportunity to review the application to see if it is fitting with that particular tool, to see if it's similar to what we consider a public utility facility. So in the bylaw, it provides the authority through 2 sections. One, basically section 3C, which provides the ability of the Planning Advisory Committee to look at applications and then prescribe any terms and conditions that would be reasonable to such a development, giving particular interest in terms of the properties within the zone that are abutting it, as well as the health, safety, and welfare of the general public in terms of the development. It also, the zoning bylaw provides Planning Advisory Committee with the authority to consider a development that's not otherwise permitted in the zoning bylaw, provided that it may be considered similar to or compatible with an existing use in that particular zone. So that's why the application has the ability to come before the Planning Advisory Committee for their consideration. With that authority given through the zoning bylaw, ultimately utilizing the authority in the Community Planning Act. The zoning bylaw also provides when it states that public utility facilities are permitted to be considered within a R1 or residential zone. It provides section 6AA, which gives the Planning Advisory Committee sort of the parameters to consider when you're, in terms of a term, if you were to wish to proceed, in terms of the terms and conditions that would be applied. And that particular section says public utilities in residential zones, facilities or buildings for public utilities will be permitted in residential zones, subject to terms and conditions as may be determined by the Planning Advisory Committee. Planning Advisory Committee shall be given consideration for the provision of setbacks, landscape buffer areas, off-street parking, and the architectural treatment compatible with any adjacent residential development. So the zoning bylaw does provide guidelines or a framework for PAC to look at in terms of when they're reviewing and giving consideration to this particular application. Public utility facility is not currently defined in our zoning bylaw. So in that particular case, we step back and we look at what is the general definition of a public utility facility or public utility, and a public utility can, in some instances, include transportation measures. So it can be electricity, telecommunications, gas, as well as transportation in some instances. When you look at the current utility board of the province, they actually do govern to some degree transportation in terms of the Motor Character Act. So there is an element of transportation governance that is included under the authority of the current Utility and Energy Board. If you were to go to Community Planning Act makes reference or does provide some definition, but it's specific to a certain section of the Community Planning Act, and it specifically relates to subdivisions. So when a subdivision plan comes in, subdivisions are to have a public utility easement provided, designated to the telecommunications and electric distribution agencies to grant them the right to go on the property to maintain such infrastructure. That particular section of the Community Planning Act actually states that it is for that specific section and that specific purpose. So the application is before a Planning Advisory Committee to give, again, consideration to whether this is deemed reasonable in terms of the intended development, the use of the land, and is it sort of keeping in with the intent of the municipal plan and the bylaws? Would it be similar to public utility facility? As I stated in my staff report, if you were to use sort of an hypothetical situation or scenario whereby, let's say, NB Power put an application in to develop this particular area and put a depot in, then they would basically be coming through the same process. It would be a public utility facility, and we would be looking at that particular development under those same parameters as Section 6B. If this was, again, a telecommunications company and they wanted to set up some sort of depot, that's a public utility facility, and that would be governed or reviewed under the same scenario. The staff report includes, information in terms of how we arrived at this particular lot. Again, that wasn't selected specifically by the municipality. The municipality provided basically a list of vacant properties along Route 119, provided the zoning information, again, in terms of the areas and those types of things, whether they were sewer serviced or municipal serviced and all those types of things, and that was just simply provided through the initial stages of the process, and then a parcel of land was selected, and then an application was made in terms of developing it for the proposed use of a paramedic base. Again, it provides information in terms of the need for the area, the demand, the reason for selecting this particular property. As we go through this process, obviously, because it's being considered similar to or compatible with notice was given to residents within 100 meters of the subject property for them to review and to provide their comments, concerns, opportunity for questions to be presented that hopefully through this process may be answered. So when we look at the parameters that are provided in section 6B in terms of setbacks, landscapes, architectural elements of the property, planning is looking at that exactly if we were going through a rezoning process or we were going, looking at the guides, the framework that's provided in the zoning bylaw. It meets all the setbacks. The building's located such that it is more than 2 times the height of the building away from any residential property. It has direct access from public streets. There is existing vegetation around the property that would be retained that would sort of provide the necessary buffering in terms of if there's additional buffering required in terms of from parking lots, then that's an opportunity that would be explored through this process, and any of those requirements would be entered into in terms of a development agreement. There's been a study done on the lot in terms of its ability to support the development from an environmental perspective. Notice was sent to the Department of Transportation to get their feedback in terms of the proposed location of the access onto Elma Lane, whether that would have any impact on their requirements with it being in terms of setbacks or locations relative to the Route 119. So enough information has been provided to obviously look at the impacts that this would have from an environmental and sort of access and traffic perspective. The area is part of a wetland, so obviously a wall permit, wetland and watercourse and wetland alteration permit would be required. Again, that would be part of the conditions of approval and subject to approval from the province. So before, I guess I pass it back to you, through you, Mr. Chairman, to the Planning Advisory Committee. Again, this is being brought forward to the Planning Advisory Committee to be considered similar to, as that is a tool that is available to the Planning Advisory Committee as provided under the Community Planning Act. The next level would be obviously if the Planning Advisory Committee feels that this would be something that should go through council in terms of a rezoning. One item that I would like to just bring forward for PAC to consider is that at this stage, considering this application as being similar to is actually a little more restrictive in that it retains this residential zoning, and the development would be restricted to the development that is currently presented to the town and to the Planning Advisory Committee. If that use was to cease, then the land would continue to retain residential zoning, and any further development would either have to fall within the residential zoning parameters or obviously come back through Planning Advisory Committee, depending on what that might be. If this goes through a rezoning process and it gets rezoned to a different designation, in this particular case, more than likely, based on the information that we have, it would probably be proceeded through as an institutional zoning, which would be similar to the Kingsway Care Center across the way. What that does is that it opens up the land to any permitted use and discretionary use that falls under that zoning. So in this particular case, you're dealing with the application that is before the Planning Advisory Committee, and it's limited to that use and use only in accordance with the development agreement that would be required. Rezoning the property obviously opens it up to further potential opportunities for different uses in that particular area. So that would be sort of clarification or just some guidance in terms of whether PAC feels that the proposed development is desirable for the particular land. Is it keeping with the intent of the zoning bylaw and the municipal plan for this particular property? And then again, PAC has the authority, if they wish to recommend that the application be referred to council for consideration for rezoning, then PAC has that authority to do so as well. I think I'll leave it there, Mr. Chair, and if there's any questions moving forward, I'm happy to address.
Thank you, Dwight. I do have one question. So if it does go zoning, it would become commercial zoning, not institutional. Isn't that correct? Commercial?
So there, what we would do is from a planning perspective and the application that's before it, we would look at what is the most fitting zoning in that particular area. So there is an opportunity for it to become commercial. Commercial would permit this type of land use, and then there would be institutional. From a planning perspective, again, we would have to have further discussions, and then look at probably what is the overall impacts and what can that lot actually support in terms of a commercial development or institutional development. But it's just an item to be aware of.
Yep.
Is that once you go through once you go through a rezoning, and if council again were to enact a bylaw amendment to change the land designation on this particular property to institutional or commercial, then it opens up that particular property to whatever uses
you wanna
are
put
in
there.
the zoning bylaw, whether that is the zoning bylaw today or it's a zoning bylaw from 10 years from now. It's whatever is in that zoning bylaw at the time, so.
Okay, thank you, Dwight. Mr. Pierce, you would have received the same package in mail, heard the discussion from Dwight. Anything you'd like to add or discuss prior to members of the PAC or members of the public asking you questions? And I know there was some letters of concern, opposition, and some for, so.
The only thing I'd like to submit is there's been multiple sites submitted to the government and to the Medivy group, the ambulance bay. And this was their particular pick just on the density and what's going on in Quispam and speed of service with the ambulance group. They picked the site. The group I'm involved with, we've built 14 of these across the province. And they've always said, okay, here's the recommended site for various reasons. And it really comes right down to a speed of service and density. And this is the site that they picked. So that's where.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions from PAC members to Mr. Pierce? Mark?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just curious here. The property today is addressed on Quispamsis Road, but yet the proposed plan shows on Alma, the access will be from Alma. Should the access be from Alma because of the short distance between Alma and Gondola Point Highway, or the town is, or the staff is comfortable with the access being on Alma, not on Quispamsis Road?
Dwight?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So in terms of the access location, it comes down to an access, the bylaw, zoning bylaw specifies that any access must be a minimum of 11 meters from the intersection of a street. I believe it's 30 meters if it's a controlled access in terms of traffic lights and those types of things. So if it meets those requirements, then the access can particularly be moved to Alma. There's been questions, and one of the comments that went back through the process from planning was just sort of initial concern about what happened. Alma Lane does queue up in terms of certain times of the years with schools and getting back on arterial and those types of things. Is there a concern with coming out of that particular area onto Alma and navigating the traffic? The response that came back was at this particular time, there isn't a concern. And if an ambulance was moving through that area anyway, whether you're accessing to get onto Alma or you're coming up Quispamsis Road and you need to go through Alma, you still have to navigate the traffic. And the Motor Vehicle Act requires vehicles to pull to the side and those types of things. So, whether it's there or the ambulance bay is somewhere else, it's a part of the actual transportation and movement of the ambulance is navigating through traffic.
Thank you. The property across the street from on Alma is also zone residential today. Am I correct to say that? And could be probably zone commercial down the road, or maybe, so they would have also an access from Alma?
At this particular time, until we actually see a development and see what that is proposed, then that's how that would be considered. But again, it goes back to what is the location of any access off Alma? Does it meet the requirements in terms of distance of the location of the access from adjoining streets? And
Which
that's,
they do today.
yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Mark and Dwight. Any further questions from PAC members? Is there anyone in the audience willing to speak for or against this item? Could you please come up and state your name for the record?
Do I move?
Yeah, you can have a seat there, Mr. Pierce. No, come on up, state your name for the record, please.
Doug McCaskill.
No, come on up.
Sorry, Doug McCaskill.
Yeah, Mr. McCaskill, go ahead.
And when you mentioned about some other properties that were considered, can you kind of give me a sense for where they are and what they were?
It's not, well, we don't have it.
You don't have it?
No. That's between the owner and, I guess, the town.
So-
Dwight may, I'm not sure if he can share that or not, so.
So there's a, part of the RFP process, there was a request that came to the town and it was basically please provide us with any vacant, and again, without having the emails in front of me, but just a general sense of it, was please provide us with vacant properties along Route 119 for this particular purpose. So what we did was basically generated a map of the current vacant properties, identifying what their zoning was. And then that was basically supplied to the proponent to choose the lot. So the municipality, and as Mr. Pierce has stated, wasn't involved in the actual selection process. Here's a list of properties, and then obviously, according to Mr. Pierce, then Medivh, I guess, used their criteria and said this is the property that we're interested in.
Mr. Pierce, you're with Medivh? No, private. Okay, that's right. Now just one thing on clarification, just on your map. When we're talking about the lane or the driveway coming out here, for those who haven't been here, this is a major blind spot. So back to your question, could you put a road or a driveway here? I think that'd be very dangerous, right? Because you're coming over a major blind spot just for reference. The other thing is the owner of that property. Can I get clarification? Is it still Bruce Robinson?
I don't know.
You know, Derek.
Yeah.
Right? So the only thing I ask is through the process of voting, I think, Derek, you should refrain from voting because you're Bruce's best friend, right? And so I would think that.
No, he doesn't have to abstain from that.
But
You can be
that's
friends.
just like having my wife.
He's
sitting on
not
the
a
board.
business partner or any involvement with that company?
Can you say you're not his business partner at all?
I'm not his business partner in any way, shape, or form.
I just find it a little bit of a conflict of interest when you have a guy's best friend sitting as part of a vote. But anyway, that's my own personal opinion. Okay? So I'm dead set against it. And just so for those, I know you're trying to plan it.
For what reasons?
I work long hours, right? And when I go to bed at night, I want to be able to go to bed at night. And I know ambulances are loud, and to live in a residential community, I expect to live in a residential community. And when I bought my property to live in a residential community. What's that? I live right here.
So my question is, what's the difference whether the damage is coming out of there or running down that arterial?
You know, the thing is, it's time. And that's a little bit where you might have been off when you said the number of times it comes out, it's not a big deal if an ambulance is going through there. If an ambulance is called 5 times a day, it's on that street 5 times a day. If it's someplace else in a commercial zoned area and going to other places within Quispamsis, it's not going by my house 5 times a day. It's not going by my house 5 times a day at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. And so there's a difference there. Okay, so I just wanted to voice my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Dwight?
Just maybe to clarify, maybe to get more clarification on that. Do the ambulances sit there? Are they actually dispatched from that particular location when you compare it with a fire station, or that's the fire trucks, that's where they sit? It's my understanding that they're not necessarily sitting there waiting for the call, that the ambulances are actually dispatched and they could be sitting somewhere else and the call comes in and they get routed to that particular location. So I'm not sure, based on my understanding of these facilities, is that they're not 3 bays with 3 ambulances sitting in there with the doors up similar to a fire station, that they're where they basically come back and the crews would be at this particular location. So maybe that's something that PAC might seek more information on.
Okay, thank you, Dwight. Anyone else in the audience or online willing to speak for or against this item? Please come up, state your name for the record. I meant to put the timer on too. We have a 10-minute timer for each.
Michelle McKay, and
Okay.
I live directly across the street from the proposed building that wants to be built, 160 Quispamsis Road. I'm a nurse, so I understand the need for this type of facility, but I too am a bit concerned about the noise level that this could increase. We're not just looking at an ambulance bay. According to my letter, it said it was going to be a health services center, so I'm not quite sure what that's going to roll out and how that's going to look. But there's going to be an increase in traffic, obviously, and I too want to keep my kids safe, and they're walking back and forth to school and during school time. There's no sidewalks, but at the same time, there's a noise level. There's going to be ambulances like the gentleman before me said at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, and we all want to sleep. I mean, come on. We deserve that. But the long and short of it is I'd like to hear a proposed plan that, okay, I feel like this has already been approved, and this is probably going to go through, and I'm not going to have a say in it. So you said before that that there was enough barrier there for sound barrier. There's no barrier. There's no trees there to separate my property from this building going up. It's literally going to be built in my front yard. And I don't know what else to say. I'm upset
All right.
about it,
No, no.
obviously. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Dwight?
Just through you, Mr. Chair, one point of order. This has not been approved. I think it's very important to state that. This is through the Planning Advisory Committee for consideration using the tool of similar to. There's been nothing approved. That's why in my opening remarks, I said if PAC feels that this is beyond the intent of similar to or the intended use of the land under its current zoning, PAC has the authority to recommend that the applicant, proponent, make an application to council, if they so choose, to entertain the idea of rezoning the property. So this is a tool or an avenue that is available to consider the application, but there's been nothing approved at all. This is the reason why we're here tonight. And just second, when I'd mentioned about enough trees for buffering, I also stated that there are areas where there may need to be additional enhancements to the buffering, and that would be an opportunity that would be covered under the development agreement process. So recognizing the back end, obviously there's lots of existing trees. There is some vegetation between the Quispamsis Road and the existing property. However, there are probably opportunities or areas that would need some enhancements. So that would be something that would have to be considered through the process. So just a point of clarification, and thank you for your comments.
And just one other thing, just the noise level. If this should go through, I would beg you to please do something about the sirens. At least, I don't know, a kilometer or two out before they can actually put them on or something like that. I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone willing to speak for? Please come up and state your name for the record, please.
My name's Elena Campbell. I'm here on behalf of Mike and Mona Campbell. And I just wanted to state just from the get-go, because something came up that I was unaware of, but is it Darren Bishop? I'm well aware of case law, and I'll just state this. I'm well aware of case law that indicates that if this is a friend's property, you probably should be excusing yourself, because it certainly would be a conflict of interest. I sit on tons of these boards. I would not be voting on any of my close friends' properties. I just wanted to put that on the record, though. My first concern would be the traffic pattern. And certainly this is going to disrupt the traffic pattern. You've only given notice to people within 100 meters. So certainly anyone who lives in East Wind Estates is now going to have their traffic pattern disturbed. Anyone who really gets onto the Quispamsis Road or takes Elma Lane is going to have their traffic pattern disrupted. So that includes the neighboring subdivision, which I would call the Kingsway subdivision. Certainly you're going to see a traffic flow change because you're going to have ambulance coming and going from this public utility, which I would certainly say, looking at the definition in the Community Planning Act, and I know it would be persuasive at most, is what we would call it in legislation, because we're looking at the father legislation. The Community Planning Act is referenced several times in the bylaw. And what I would say is we're looking, and the public utilities that are contemplated in the Community Planning Act aren't public utilities where you're seeing a coming and going. They're depots. They're providing a service. Most of the time it's electricity or power lines or, you know, telecommunication centers. They might see, you know, someone come and service them once in a while, but you're not having the coming and going. What I can tell you about Alma Lane is there are buses lined up on Alma Lane every morning. 5, sometimes 6, and they're all making a left-hand turn. They're all stuck. Most of the time if you're driving up, and there's a lot of them, sometimes you'll see someone who's really nice and they'll let a couple of the buses get out because it's so jammed. What I can tell you is I have a vested interest. My parents live at 150 Quispamsis Road. So I am a lawyer. I work long hours. My parents will likely be putting my kids on the bus. My kids go to the school up the road. So they will be standing at the end of their driveway, which is just in front of this proposal. Just fine and dandy, but the ambulances are most likely going to have to take a right to get out. They're coming up on a blind hill. They've got residences that have children in them, not to mention people who have worked the whole night and do not want the sound. There's been no contemplation of sound barriers, but there's been no contemplation of buses and kids. My kids are at the bottom of that driveway. They're also going to get dropped off at the end of the day because, sadly enough, I don't get off at 2 o'clock. So when their bus comes, it comes to their grandparents' house. And of course, they're going to get dropped off. Is there any allowance for that? I will tell you that recently the ditches or the siding of the ditches has been dug deeper. That was just because of water flow. But it doesn't allow for a large shoulder on those roads. So I know, pursuant to the traffic laws in New Brunswick, you are supposed to pull over for an ambulance, but there's not much give there. And there's certainly not a lot of give on Alma Lane and contemplating snowbanks. So what I will tell you is there are blind corners there all the time. There's nowhere to put the snow. We're getting more and more snow, and there's nowhere to put it. So kids are already at a disadvantage when they're standing at the end of their driveways. Certainly, this zone is residential. It wasn't contemplated to have a lot of traffic flow coming and going. Certainly, it would be my opinion, and it's just an opinion. Every lawyer has one, so you can find probably a different opinion somewhere else, but it certainly doesn't fit in within the public utility. That's not what it was proposed for, okay? Certainly, if it was rezoned to commercial, then yes, you know, have your fill. Something gets to go there. But it hasn't been rezoned. You know, we look at the subdivision, and the subdivision itself, East Wind Estates, has restrictive covenants. So certain houses aren't even allowed to have vinyl siding. And now we're going to put an ambulance bay on that property. This is a John Hart subdivision that was put in 30, 40 years ago. You know, there are tons of restrictions within it, and that's kind of the allure of this East Wind Estates subdivision. So certainly I'd be asking that, considering your vote, that you consider children that are going to be standing there, because certainly they're going to have to pick up the bus there.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Do you live there in that area yourself?
My parents actually live.
You don't live there though, correct?
No, I do not.
Okay, so you're speaking on behalf of them?
I'd be speaking on behalf of my parents.
Okay. And you talked about traffic. One of the recommendations, if you read the report, indicates that a full traffic study has to be completed at the same time. And the covenants, you spoke on the covenants. PAC does not recognize covenants in subdivisions as part of that's within the subdivision. We don't enforce covenants. So I just want to make that relevance clear. Thank you.
Certainly, I just in response to that, I would mention that within 6AA of the bylaw, it indicates, and certainly if it was discretionary use, there would be some allowance that it looks structurally the same or architecturally the same. And just to note, the subdivision there, there's restriction on vinyl siding. There's a restriction on detached garages. So certainly there are a lot of restricted covenants that go with East Wind Estates. And then there's going to be this building.
Yep, I appreciate that, and if it gets zoned, if it did get zoned commercial, I'm just making sure you're aware of that, and say, for example, it did get zoned commercial by the owner, and the ambulance pulled out, a restaurant could go there with any question. If the property ends up being rezoned for commercial, to allow this established, we're not here to zone it commercial, but if we decline it, refer it to council for approval for commercial, and all of a sudden the ambulance decides to pull out, a restaurant can go there without coming back to PAC. Just I want you to be aware of that. But if it stays as residential, as discretionary use, and something happens to the ambulance and they pull out, it goes back to residential. Doesn't go back from commercial back to residential.
It would stay residential
Right now,
entire
the way
time,
we're talking about
Yes.
the use
This would
today,
just
but
be a
if we
discretionary
refer it
use.
to council to do approval for rezoning, then that would change the property zoning, then anything could go there.
And certainly that would have to be voted on by council.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. I just wanted to make that so everyone's clear on that. I think Dwight had mentioned that earlier in his talk, so, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience willing to speak for or against this item? Third and final time, is there anyone in the audience willing to speak for or against this item? Mr. Pierce, can you come up? Dwight?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, I thank the residents for taking part in this and offering their concerns and being part of the process. And just to make them aware that if the Planning Advisory Committee feels that this is something that should be referred or brought forward to council, then the same public hearing process would be obviously through the council process, right? So you would get notice again, and you would get an opportunity then to speak before council through the rezoning process. So this sort of is, falls in sort of the similar lines in terms of the public hearing and giving everybody an opportunity to voice their concerns and hear them, and for PAC to consider what has been presented. So just to make them aware that if they were to proceed down that road, then they would have an opportunity in the future again to speak, but in that particular case, it would be before council. Thank you.
Brenda?
Just a question, and you might answer that. I had the privilege, I guess, to go in an ambulance once, and I didn't remember if they started off with a siren. The only time I realized they were using the siren is when something got in front of them, and I think it's right into the hospital driveway before they tried the siren. Do they usually start out with just the lights, and if it need a siren, they use a siren?
Correct. When they leave the ambulance bays, it's lights on, and they'll come out, and if there's traffic, say the concerns with the school bus, they would turn the sirens on, and that's the only thing. So one of the concerns was 3 o'clock in the morning. It's not a TV show. They don't open the doors and hit the lights and siren and come flying out at 3 o'clock in the morning. They'll open the door, turn the lights on, get out into, 3 o'clock in the morning, there's not a lot of traffic. And it's very rare that they'd actually turn the sirens on.
And I find also that if I'm driving and most other people, you just see the lights. You don't need the siren.
Right.
And you pull over. And like, not all 3 ambulances will be parked there.
No. They should strategically sit in different spots.
Yeah.
And if you've seen on the Renforth, the cutoff, there's always an ambulance sitting down there. So they don't all sit in the bay. They go to strategic places where studies have been done where they get
on the highway
and like I said, it's all speed of service. That's why the proposed coming out on Alma Lane, well, it stops 1-2 turns.
Yeah.
So and that's why they like the roundabout. They can get out. They can pretty much go anywhere from there. And that's why the Alma Lane, they want the exit from there. So you're not on Quispamsis Road, take a right, another right, and then hit the roundabout.
Yeah. It's so that they would not go by his house 4 or 5 times a
I
day,
can't say for sure,
unless
but,
somebody out in
but
that area needs them.
realistically, if they're going down that way, they're not gonna go right, they're gonna go right out on the throughway.
Yeah. And do you know, are they informed when trains are coming by so you don't use the Pettingill?
Yep. Yeah, they would all have they'd have all that information. Yeah.
Okay, all right, because I'm going to be the other side of those tracks, and I want to say, make sure you know how to get there.
Thanks, Brenda.
Anyway,
Yeah.
thanks.
Thanks, everyone, for the comments. I'd like to thank the public for their comments on this. It's all interesting. That being said, any member of PAC like to put a motion for or against with some terms and conditions? Brent?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion. Planning Advisory Committee proceed with approving the 3-bay paramedic base for Medivh Health Services New Brunswick on the property currently addressed as 157 Quispamsis Road, PID 302-15461 with the following terms and conditions. 1, the off-street collective parking shall comply with the zoning bylaw 038, section 6P, 3E, 6P4, 6P5, and 2, a full comprehensive traffic flow analysis will be required to be submitted with a review on the proposed entrance exit off Elm Lane versus Quispamsis Road. 3, once the proposed entrance exit is confirmed, a civic address change may be required. 4, the completion of an environmental site assessment prior to final development and permitting approvals from the town. 5, approval of the Department of Environment requirement of a water course and wetland alteration WAWA permit. 6, the proposed development should be forwarded to the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure review and comment as it relates to development of the provincial highway route 119, and it's already been completed as noted. 7, street lighting at the entrance to development should be installed. 8, all building light fixtures and parking lot lights be downward directed. 9, all materials and equipment ordered on site are responsibility of the developer. 10, the owner is to enter into development agreement with the town of Quispamsis. 11, the land should be developed in accordance with the building and development plans filed with and approved by the town. 12, if the development does not substantially proceed within six months at the date of approval for each phase, the developer shall restore the lands in an attractive natural state, and such restoration is to be completed within 60 days. 13, all signage requires Department of Transportation approval and must not be a nuisance or cause interference to drivers on Route 119. 14, the civic number must be visible on the building in accordance with number of buildings bylaw. 15, sound barriers are to be constructed parallel to Quispamsis Road. And 16, the building is to be developed as to blend in with the neighborhood.
Thank you, Brent. Can I have a seconder on that? Pardon? Yeah, go ahead.
Number 15, sound barriers, can you?
Yeah, just barrier to prevent the sound from carrying along into the residential neighborhoods.
From where the what?
Parallel to Quispamsis Road. And if required, across the backside of the property.
Are you suggesting a specific type? Sorry.
No, I'll leave that up to,
Fences, what are you talking about?
I'll leave that up to the developer in the town to, yes.
Through Mr. Chair to build on the request for clarification. So is that something that needs to be studied by the consulting engineer with options provided? Okay.
Oops, hang on, Brent.
Because when you get into
I'm fine with the consulting engineer coming back that way, so long as it blends in with the neighborhood.
It's when you get into sound barrier, you're looking at acceptable decibel levels and those types of things. So that's something, that's why I'm seeking clarification and whether that would come from their consulting engineer to provide options that would address the concerns in terms of noise, in terms of sirens. Obviously, that would be part of the development agreement. And then obviously, as Mr. Pierce has indicated, it's a procedural thing as well. So just clarification whether that's should be coming from their consulting engineer and not a recommendation of the planning department or the engineering department of the town.
Hang on, Brent. We can't do both at the same time. Go ahead.
It should be coming from the consulting engineer.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder on that? Mark?
No, I want to make a comment.
Okay.
I don't want to second him. I'm not sure if a sound barrier is necessary in this case, because as Mr. Priest mentioned, siren doesn't take off from the time they leave the building. If that's the case, we need to put a sound barrier. They will have to put a sound barrier in many locations in Quispamsis, because when the siren goes on, I mean, we cannot put a sound barrier everywhere. So I'm not sure it's necessary. And I do sympathize with local residents about, you know, there's no perfect place for an EMS. I mean, it's not an industrial park, will not work because it'd be too far from the residents, things like that. But on the other end, you know, I think this location is a good location for it, and the reason being is it's centrally located to service a lot of the residential properties around. And the second thing is, if you ever need it one day, you'll be lucky because you'll be 10 seconds away from the ambulance versus other people that might be 10, 15 minutes, so that you may save your life. So, I'm sorry? I'm not sure what you're referring.
Kendall? Oh, hang on, Kendall. Wait, I got to shut Mark off here. Okay, go ahead, Kendall.
My comment would be, do you need sound barriers if the siren didn't come on until after the traffic circle? Like,
We can't put that. That doesn't fall under the planning.
well, you might be able to put it in there.
That's legislation. We can't. That's their operation. We can't.
Hang on, go ahead.
I mean, we can't dictate under the Planning Act how Medivh operates their ambulances. That falls under the provincial legislation or whatever, I'm assuming under the Motor Vehicle Act, so.
Okay, so sound barrier, are we in the sound barrier in or out with the, from the consultant? That's where we are. It's item 15, I believe. Can we have a seconder on that anyway? We can debate it.
I'll second it if no one else has seconded it, but I guess my comment would be the consultant should consider with the operator if the sound barrier and the timing of the sirens could be considered to kind of reduce the cost of the sound barrier and reduce the impact to citizens. So maybe both groups can work together to find even a better solution. And they're the experts, I'm not, so.
Okay, with that, seconders or debate, Mr. Bishop?
I guess I have a comment. I guess, so Mr. Pierce, you've said you've built 14 of these throughout the province. Do any of your other facilities have sound barriers in residential areas?
No.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop and Mr. Pierce. Brenda?
My comment is, are there still going to be that exit onto Quispamsis Road?
No.
That's going to be shut off? Okay, because I was
So,
wondering if could sound
Probably
barriers.
be a row of trees. Like, we want to make it fit into the neighborhood as well.
Okay.
So we can plant a row of trees along there as a buffer. Like, we're easy to work with. Like,
Okay, I understand that. I'm also good if that number 15 is removed from the.
Oh, hang on, Brent. Go ahead.
I have a question for the developer. What happens if you change the orientation of your building and face it towards the boulevard and put the back of your building towards Quispamsis Road? Does that work on the property?
No, it doesn't on that property.
Okay. I'm familiar with your facility on Milton Road, and I know how that sits.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Thank you. Is there any further debate on the motion that's forward? So the motion was the 14 items, but the 15th was the sound barrier removed, and 16 was what? Violet, can you repeat that back again?
That the building is to be developed as to blend in with the neighborhood,
That'd be number
with the
15.
architecture. Yeah, if you're removing the sound barriers, that'll be number 15.
Okay, with that being said, Dwight, anything further on that? We're good?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just I guess a point of order before you get to a vote. It's establishing whether Mr. Bishop feels he's in conflict of interest before casting a vote. Sort of a point of order, so that's for the record. Thanks.
He's deciding whether Mr. Bishop, is he in conflict of interest? Mr. Bishop?
I will abstain from voting.
Thank you. With that being said, can we have a vote, please? That being said, we have a vote of 4-0, unanimously passed, with Mr. Bishop abstaining and Mr. Guest abstaining from the vote. With that being said, you in next 5 to 7 business days, you have a letter in the mail. Please work with the town to have all necessary paperwork and documentation in place, and best of luck with your development. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your time.
Go on to item 7F. Approval to allow development of Hammond River Park with accessory buildings to provide shelter and public washrooms at 28 Raynard Drive, PID 0073346. The applicant, please state their name for the record.
Randy Charlton?
Mr. Charlton?
Yes, Randy
Yeah,
Charlton.
Randy, we're going to have Jennifer introduce that item, then we'll maybe get back to you for some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this actually is an application to improve the park at Hammond River Park. And I'll reference the municipal plan 7.5.1. States that it shall be a policy of council to maintain, improve, and upgrade existing recreational facilities. The subject property is zoned Parks and Recreation. It has a size of 167,354 square meters. It is owned by the town and is host to numerous trails throughout the forested area and along the banks of the river. The plan proposes to develop the site with a washroom building, 2 picnic table shelters, an additional 2 picnic table pads, a multi-user swing, a log jam play station, several trees and trails to match existing trails that run throughout the park. The parking area will also be more clearly delineated with additional parking and drainage swales. This is a town-initiated project. There is no need to enter into development agreement with the owners. There were a few calls received of concern. One call was actually just to confirm that the land was staying within the town-owned and as a park, and yes, it is indeed. The second call received expressed opposition, and they were concerned about the previous building that was there and that there may be some youth that may be causing some destruction to the site. And that there's partying at night that causes noise disturbance. Those are the only concerns we received, and staff have no concerns with this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. You would receive the same package we did in the mail. Is anything you'd like to add or discuss prior to some questions from PAC or members of the public?
No, the only question I had was about the letter. I didn't realize that, and maybe the distance from a water course has changed to initiate the section in the letter that discusses that. I thought it was a 100-meter buffer, but the river's quite a bit further away than that. And I just was wondering, for my own personal knowledge, just clarification on.
Okay, Jennifer, can you? Sorry, I'll wait till you're.
Well, it says section 6BB1A of the zoning bylaw. Number 38 states that no alteration of existing buildings or land shall occur on any property bordering a water course without first requesting and being granted approval by the PAC. So I was just wondering what that distance actually was, because I was under the impression that it was.
Okay, we'll get that right now.
And that's only me asking the question. I already asked the consultant about a Wawa permit, and he said it wasn't required, so I didn't know if one tied into the other to make sure that I had the.
Generally speaking, the buffer is 30 meters. However, in our bylaw, any development on a waterfront property does require PAC approval. This is a property that's found abutting a water course, so
Okay,
it does require the approval.
The boundary of the property is.
But it would be 30 meters buffer for development at the at the high water mark.
That's why, it's because the PID ends at the water. Okay. No, that was just, I don't have any problem with it.
Any other items?
No.
Okay, any members from PAC have any questions for the applicant? None being, anyone online or in the audience willing to speak for or against this item? Anyone in the audience or online willing to speak for or against this item? Third and final time. Is there anyone in the audience or online willing to speak for or against this item? None being, would a member of PAC like to put a motion for or against with terms and conditions? Mr. Guest.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Put forward the motion that the Planning Advisory Committee approve the development of Hammond River Park with accessory buildings to provide shelter and public washrooms as a discretionary use as per section 23B1A, and approve the development occurring on a property bordering a watercourse as per section 6BB1A of zoning bylaw number 038 at 28 Rayner Drive, PID 000-73346. The following terms and conditions must be considered. 1, a building permit is obtained prior to construction.
Thank you, Mr. Guest. Can I have a seconder on that? Mr. Bishop?
I'll second that.
Any debate on the motion? None being, can we please vote on it? Motion carried unanimously. Next 5 to 7 business days, you have your letter in the mail. Please work with the town with all necessary paperwork and documentation in place. I suspect that's not going to be an issue.
No, I don't think. I just had one other question, if you
Sure.
don't mind. Now, before construction starts, but you mean construction of the building that's related to the building permit, I can do any other site work or?
Let's work with the town on that. They'll let you know what you can and can't do, so.
I'm sure it's fine.
Yeah,
but,
they'll guide you in that way for sure.
And hopefully all the security there will help take care of all the kids down there partying. I remember, I used to go to scout camp there when I was a kid. And
yeah.
I went to the site, and of course I printed the picture that they have on the site plan. And I was expecting the building was still there. So when I got there, I'm like, I'm not even in the right place. Anyway.
All right, thank you.
We should have voted earlier for me to be able to get in ahead, like, of the crowd.
You can talk to the town, right?
Because I took too long to respond. They probably bumped me down the list.
You didn't make the queue.
Thank you. Good night.
Item 7G, street name approval. Equality Lane, laneway between end of Landing Court and Arts and Cultural Park and KB Library overflow parking lot, Comex parking. Dwight.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, as indicated in the staff report, Councillor Noah Donovan has requested that that section of laneway between the Commerce parking and the end of Landing Court be named Quality Lane. I believe the package or the correspondence provides PAC with the rationale and his reasoning behind requesting that. It's a reflection of providing equality, regardless of who you may be. And that would be something that would foster decisions of council and planning advisory committee, and it would be fitting to have that recognized through the naming of a roadway or a laneway in close to the town hall. So this particular section has been identified by Mr. Donovan as Councillor Donovan as under consideration. So the subdivision bylaw community planning act requires street names to be approved by the development officer as well as the considered and reviewed by the planning advisory committee. And that's the reason this item is before the planning advisory committee, to seek your recommendations regarding approving the name as presented. There are no conflicts with other street names in the region, and the name is fitting and appropriate. So I will leave it there, Mr. Chair. Open to any questions from the planning advisory committee.
Thank you, Dwight. Any members of PAC have any questions for the applicant? None being, it's not open now. We're not open, we're still open forum for any, it's not an audience. It would be, wouldn't it? Anyone in the audience or online willing to speak for or against this item? It's not a public forum, I didn't think so. Okay, that's why I was asking. Can I have a motion, can someone make a motion for or against with terms and conditions? Brent?
Make the motion, planning advisory committee support the naming of the laneway from the end of Landing Court to the Arts and Cultural Park and Kenneman Cases Library Overflow parking lot to Equality Lane, subject to the following. 1, a street sign is requested and installed by the town of Quispamsis Public Works Department.
Have a seconder on that? Mark Goslin? Oops.
Second.
Can we have a vote on that, please? Dwight, do you want to add something? No? Okay. After that other one? Yeah. Brenda?
There's one, is just the comics that's fronted on that street, the bus stop.
People use it. I use it. I use it. That street, Quality Lane.
Okay, that's, my point is, there's a bus stop on there. Is that listed as like Landing Court or?
There you go. It's because the actual facility, the bus stop needed a civic number. So that's the reason why it was referenced to Landing Court, right? So the name change will not impact mailing addresses and all that type of stuff unless somebody has mail going to the bus stop.
I mean, I don't have any problems at all with the name. It's just not an impressive street. Anyway.
Violet?
Should we notify the bus transportation services? You know, sometimes they put the signs at the top as to what direction they're going. I don't know. Do we need to do any of that as per comment?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we usually would notify anybody that has direct impact in terms of mailing address or deliveries and those types of things. In this particular case, it's not direct impact. The only item probably would be if it's for 911, if there's any reference or any display in there that would say you're at 15 Landing Court when you call 911, then we would obviously look at addressing that if that needs to be. Other than that, there wouldn't be sort of a concern in terms of impacts of renaming or naming, in this particular case, that particular laneway.
Okay, do we have a seconder on that, did we? Yeah, Brenda's got a vote. Motion carried. Dwight, you'll have your letter in the mail next 5 to 7 business days. Seven H, Hillcrest Holdings. Dwight, I think you're up on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This item is before the Planning Advisory Committee as part of a subdivision plan that was looking at mainly creating some parcels of land for land exchange between two developers, Hillcrest Holdings and Langar Limited. So they're basically creating some parcels of land for land exchange, setting things up for future development. When that future development will be, at this point, is unknown. It's sort of as these developers are just looking for the right term. These senior developers, they've been, they've helped develop quite a bit of Quispamsis, and they're getting to that stage of looking at obviously preparing for the next stages of their life. So they're looking at some land swaps to set things up accordingly. That's the reason the plan is before the Planning Advisory Committee, because it includes future streets. Community Planning Act requires that any subdivision plan that has a future street must be reviewed by the Planning Advisory Committee prior to going to council for assent. Planning Advisory Committee is to look at the location of the future street with respect to its convenience of access. It doesn't prejudice future developments. It provides convenient access to the adjoining parcels for any future development of those adjoining parcels. It looks at the topography. In this particular case, it's relatively flat. There's no sort of steep changes in this particular area. You would see excessive street grades. So PAC would take those things into consideration as they look at the proposed locations of the future street, and then offer support or recommendations to the development officer and bringing the plan to council for assent. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dwight. Any members of PAC have any questions for Dwight? Brent?
I just have one question for Dwight. Dwight, that future street, are they planning on bringing that out to 119 eventually? And the reason I'm asking, there seems to be an off-pile work going on right there in the last 3 or 4 weeks. All of a sudden, it was all grown over, and now there's a nice dirt road right off the Vincent Road that goes right up. The road was cut out at one time. Now it's been grubbed again in the last couple of weeks.
Dwight?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So the activity that's taken place in the particular area is simply to deal with drainage. So part of the process was drainage was actually was following the municipal services easement, and it wasn't actually going into the location that it was intended to. So the activity's gone in there is basically to do some reshaping to get the water flowing to where it needs to go. That was not part of the road development. Whether that street will ever connect to Route 119, at this stage, there's been nothing formally submitted to the town or, to my knowledge, to the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure requesting such a connection. But, yep. As we always say never.
Anyone else have any questions for Dwight? None being, when a member of PAC like to put a motion for or against with terms and conditions. Kendall?
Recommend the Planning Advisory Committee support the Development Officer in bringing the Hillcrest Holdings Limited and Langard Limited subdivision plan to council for consideration of assent and final approval for registration, subject to the following. Number one, any further development of the future streets and adjacent lands be subject to approval by the town. And number two, the creation of parcels A and D are for consideration purposes only for future development of the lands and are not to be considered building lots on their own.
Thank you, Kendall. Can I have a seconder on that? Mr. Guest?
I'll second it.
Any debate on the motion? Dwight?
That should read, just a clarification, item 2, parcels A through D, not A and D.
Thank you for clarification.
Thanks.
Kendall, you okay? We're gonna do it anyway. Can we vote on that, please? Motion carried. Thank you, everyone. Item 8, none being, we'll move on to item. No, there's no no items in 8. No, not in mine.
I don't have that.
attached?
Nope.
No.
Oh, God, they're on the line but not attached, okay. I'll put them in the next one, sorry.
It's all right. Item 9, have a motion to adjourn, please. Mr. Bishop,
So moved.
seconder on that. Come on, speak up. All right, Brenda.